Welcome to Stampscaping 101. This is another image video how-to using the Waterside Bluffs, left and right. Okay, they can be used individually or in conjunction with one another, and they've always been two of the more popular images in the line, but I haven't used them a great deal lately, and I thought I would do a little video on just some basics on usage and some variations that you can do with them. Okay, now what they are is a waterside type of image. We have a little bit of grassy shore, as well as some beginnings of water, and then it transitions out and kind of tapers off, you know, so you can have this, if you use these in conjunction with one another, you can stamp them pretty far apart and have a large body of water. But if you're stamping on a quarter page card, you know, this little area down here and the width of the stamp pretty much takes care of most of the area that you'll happen to encounter. I usually just stamp them out in a dark tone. Sometimes I will use a little bit of tone in them, but for the most part it's a fairly light image, so I want to go with some fairly dark colors. If you want to have this grass green, you can certainly stamp it out and then tone in that green, but if you want to get a little bit of a head start and you want to have a little bit of green in here, and let's say it's a high noon, sunny day type of thing with blue reflections or blue water, then you can kind of color it in a dark tone, and then what I like to do is I like to take pens and accent some of these areas with some of that tone that'll be going into the, you know, those areas. But I don't go too light because it's a fairly light image to begin with. You know, it's just basically made up of a little bit of grass and a little bit of texture like that to get us started as far as our compositional needs go. Okay, let's do just some basic stamping with it. Let's say I'm doing a quarter page scene in a portrait or vertical format here. Okay, I would just stamp that out like so. Okay, and this is left open on the top. Okay, so depending on what you want to stamp in that area, you can do whatever you want. Okay, it doesn't have like a hard edge up there or anything like that. Usually I like to do it with my basic grass filler stamp, which is the Sedge filler. Okay, let's say we go with something like that. And if we wanted to, we can add a structure in there, we can add trees, whatever you want. You know, I could stamp a little cabin in the background. But let's just go for some trees right here, and we'll see what this foundation will end up forming. Okay, this is the tree cluster stamp. Let me get a little bit of a masking material in the form of paper towels here. I'll take a tree cluster and try to get a lot of usage out of it. Let's go with kind of the top half of it back there in the distance. How about that? Just the tips. Something of that sort. Okay. So anyways, we have a nice foundation here of a shoreline and a little bit of a meadow in here with a little variations of the tree cluster. And if I want to, I can, you know, set additional hills in the background here. If I do that, what I like to do is I like to push the distance. I can use smaller trees, but you can also just use less of your given tree, so meaning just taking the tips of it like so. And you have some background trees in there, okay? You can see what this does down here. It just kind of establishes this whole area down here as far as water goes. And there's things like the water pattern stamp, which you can stamp down here and kind of establish that as, you know, having a little bit more texture. Maybe you can do, if this is going to be blue down here, you can stamp that water texture and, you know, variations of blue too, or something like that sort. Okay, let's see. On the stamp here, we have, let me get it to focus in. We have this little grass texture down here, and that's what kind of separates those little, I don't know, bluffs or whatever, down here around these rocks. Okay, so to reiterate that whole texture, but to push the depth in the scene, maybe I can use some reeds here in the foreground. And that establishes a water's edge where the viewer is at. Okay, so that is a composition with the foundation of the Waterside Bluff left, used on its own. Okay, let's use, now I can do the exact same thing with the right one as well. It would just be in the opposite way. But let's do something here. Let's use these two in conjunction with one another. And you can see a little bit of variation here. I guess if you had they used to have these mirror stamps or something like that, and it was basically just a blank sheet of rubber where people would take an impression, they would ink it up and stamp it out onto this, you know, big, huge rubber stamp, but it was just a flat piece of rubber. They would stamp it onto that. And then while this ink was still wet, you can take that and make an impression out of that. I have no idea who that company was. This is probably 20 years ago, but it was a good idea, you know. You can get kind of the opposite, you know, direction of any given stamp that you owned. Okay, this is the right and left used together. Same thing, take that Sedge filler stamp and go so. Okay. How about some reeds in the foreground? It's kind of making it a little pond, I guess. Alright. And as always in the grassy areas, if you want to, you can do some little structures. If I stamped a larger cabin in there, it would bring the pond closer to it. If you stamp something really small, like so, it kind of pushes the depth in the scene and makes this distance even greater. So the larger the structure, the closer that little pond will be to it. Visually, let's use some of these trees in here again. Yeah, something like that. Okay. All right, now let's push the use of these bluffs a little bit more. Okay, that was used in conjunction with one another, all right? This would be easier on a larger piece of paper, but let's do this on this quarter page. Okay. All right, let's go down a little bit lower, like so. Okay. I just used about a third of it, maybe. Okay. Let's come back with the right side bluff. Bluff. Okay. Sedge filler. Like so. And let's go back to the left again. Let's just use a little bit of this, right about like so here, okay? And I'll tell you what, I'm going to wipe off a little bit of this bottom because I know I'm going to come down into this little area. I don't want that. Or I don't want it too much, okay? Something like that. It looks a little mishmash right now, but I'll show you what I do with it. I was going to say, I wonder if I should use a little bit of this upper right-hand corner, okay? And I'll mask this little bluff off. Okay. And I'll just roughly, you know, just eyeball it. If it doesn't match up perfectly, it doesn't matter. Okay. Alright. Put a little bit of a kind of a cap up there as far as the horizon line goes. Okay, now this looks a little mishmash, which it is. We can have a little bit of a, you know, rock texture, water texture in there. These tiny rocks would work really good in this water section, just to kind of unify it a little bit with some universal texture, and to also kind of fill that in a touch. But let's see here. Let's add some foreground. Okay. Definitely a kind of a wetlands type of area look to it right now. Maybe a seasonal wetland, perhaps, creating some marsh and habitat. But now let's separate these little shorelines in here, okay? I could put some birds in here, and that would be more, like I said, like a marshy wetland type of thing. But let's kind of, in scale, give this the illusion of being a little bit of a larger body. You know, maybe more of a pond or something like that than a puddle, okay? So what I can do is I can take these same trees. You can use different trees. I wanted to keep this kind of minimal in terms of the number of stamps I'm using on this, because it's supposed to be just kind of about the Waterside Bluffs as far as the foundation goes, okay? Different trees in here. Okay, now there's a little bit of a bluff right there. Sometimes it's kind of even hard to see, which isn't a bad thing, because it's all about the universal application of these designs and how they kind of blend in with one another. Okay, some trees right there. As we're moving into the distance, maybe I can use a smaller portion of the tree stamp, okay? Have it on the opposite shore, on the right-hand shore. Okay, you can see how this is kind of building up here. Alright. And how about there in the distance? I tell you what. Let's put this cabin right in there. This is the cabin small stamp, number 248A. And if I didn't say it, this is the tree cluster small stamp. There's two sizes of them. Larger one could be used, but I'm using so many, I'm making so many different impressions with this one on only a quarter-page card, so probably the smaller one's a little bit more appropriate for it. Okay, one of the beauties of rubber stamps when it comes to scenic stamping and landscape creations is the repetition of imagery. Alright, now I did use the two different Waterside Bluffs in here, but how many impressions have we made with the reeds large? Quite a few, down here at the base. Sedge cluster, for sure, in here. And all those different trees just from, various uses of this, so I stamped the whole thing kind of closer to us. This is a little bit farther away, and I don't know if I did that, quarter inch or eighth of an inch up there. Yeah, I guess so, right back in here and here. So, repetition of imagery in terms of creating unity throughout a scene, but also scenic stamping, you can really push the use of your given image, but just using it in different ways to give you different looks, different, illusions as far as depth goes, and, I don't think it looks like, oh, there's that same tree, I mean, you can tell, it's the same top of the tree or something like that, but just by using different portions of it like that, it doesn't look so repetitious to me in terms of, a singular usage of one stamp, okay? So anyways, there's some foundational types of usages of those two stamps. It's an easy way to start, kind of a shoreline type of scene. And it's certainly easy enough to build on it. So you can do all kinds of things. Like I said, a larger kind of focal point or structure in there will make your foreground area seem much closer to it and smaller in dimension or whatnot by contrast. Alright, so anyways, that is the Waterside Bluff left and right, and I'm looking at these scenes. I really have the urge to kind of go in here and finish them off, but I'm not going to do that. I might do that on a separate video or something like that. I especially want to do, I think, this one right here. It calls to me. So anyways, thanks for watching, and thanks for tuning in to the channel as always.